Okay. So welcome to this evening's workshop on building resilience and managing the next steps. My name is Hope Westgate and I'm a clinical psychologist in the Psychology in Schools team, and I will be leading this workshop today alongside my colleague Emily, who I'll let introduce herself.
Hiya, I'm Emily. I'm an assistant psychologist and I work in between the Psychology in Schools team and the Under 18 Wellbeing Service.
Right, thanks Emily. So just to start off before we begin the presentation, I just wanted to mention this tool that we use throughout the presentation today. So it's something called Slido. If you've been to one of our workshops before, you'll be really familiar with what this is. Essentially, it's something that you can just go onto a phone or computer or some kind of device. You don't have to kind of have a login account. You just go to slido.com. And essentially you put in a code, and as we go through this today, we'll ask some questions of you and you can respond instantly on that. So it's really helpful because it enables us to have a little bit of interaction with you guys, and parents often say that that element is quite helpful for them as well, to see what other parents are saying. But just a note on this, you won't have to put in your name, so it is anonymous. So we do ask that when you're answering questions, please don't put anything that's kind of private or personal or sensitive. So don't put things like your own name or your child's name, because that will make it not anonymous. So that's just something to be aware of. And also we do record these workshops, so it is being recorded currently so that it can then be shared with others and sent out. So that's just something to know about that. Don't worry, I will go through the Slido instructions again as soon as the first question comes up. But to begin with, it's just going on slido.com, either on your phone or your computer or some device, and we'll tell you the code number to put in when we start those questions. Okay, so this is one of those here. So if you go to slido.com and the event code is 865603. So fingers crossed it should be coming up. And the question is, have you attended one of our parent workshops before? So we've got some people instantly have said yes. So I'm sure you'll be familiar with Slido. So let's see how many people. Okay, so I'll just give it a moment for other people. It normally does work. If it's not working for you, you may want to try it on a different internet browser. But usually it's quite simple, just put in that event code and you can respond directly to us. So at the moment, out of those that have responded, we've got a bit of a 50-50 divide to whether you've attended it or not. Okay, I can see there's 6 people logged in. I think there's a few more that are on the call, so I will just give you another moment.
Sticking with the 50-50 theme.
Okay, brilliant. Should we go on to the next one?
Okay, so just to start, can we just ask what age your child is, or children if you've got more than one, just to give us a sort of idea of where we're pitching this at. Big range. Okay, oh, that's interesting. So most of them are older at the moment, lots of 16 pluses, but also some little ones that probably sort of primary school, looking at that transition there. if you can join in on the Slido, it's really helpful for us just to, throughout this, it's just a way that we can kind of be a little bit responsive and adaptive to the kind of needs of the audience and the people we've got here. So please do join in if you can. Okay, should we move on? We've got, okay, so today what we're going to be focusing on, so this workshop is all around resilience and transitions. So I'll start off thinking about what is resilience and how we develop resilience in our young people, and the sort of 5 steps to wellbeing and resilience. And then Hope will take over and talk you through transitions and change, and then some really sort of practical steps as to how we can support young people to manage those changes and to sort of get through those. Okay, so just to start, this is just it'll make a little word cloud. If you could just say what words you associate with resilience, just so that we've kind of got an idea of what that term means to you. So that we know that we're all working from the same page. And there are no wrong answers and there are no silly answers, just chuck out anything. Okay, so coping, yeah. Strength in adversity, nice description. Surviving, yeah. Ability to cope with difficult situations. Yeah, absolutely. So adaptable, getting through it. Yeah, strong. I'm guessing that's, yeah, ability to recover from difficult situations, cope with different situations. Okay, good, yeah. Okay, so I think we're all on the same sort of page. I'll just give you another minute for anyone who's... The trouble is with this, because it moves around, it's really hard to see which the new ones are. So self-belief, okay, yeah, if we carry on to the next slide. So our kind of definition of resilience is about having the ability to bounce back and to continue to move forward in the face of challenging situations. It's important to say that it's not about not having emotions. It's about feeling these normal emotions that we all experience, but learning to keep going or keep focused in the direction that we want to be going in. And resilience can really buffer the challenges that we come up to. So the more resilient that we're able to be, the better we are able to cope with some of these challenges and difficulties. And something that we'll think more about today is the challenge of change and transition. There is a correlation between resilience and well-being. So people who have got higher resilience will tend to have higher well-being than people who have lower resilience. Resilience is not something we're born with. It's something that we can learn and something that we can develop and something that we can nurture in our children. So our brains change as a result of the experiences that we go through. And so if we're getting the right experiences, we can support people to build that resilience, which in turn should also help to promote sort of positive well-being. Children are often a lot more resilient than we give them credit for. I'm sure you can all think of times where your child has managed to just cope with something that you've thought, wow, I wouldn't have expected them to be able to manage that. So although you might be here because at the moment you're kind of wondering how your child will cope with that, if they maybe need more resilience, if they're likely to struggle with some of these transitions, do think about the kind of definition of resilience that we've just given, and about times that your child has shown that they've been able to demonstrate some resilience in the face of life's challenges, because there almost certainly will be some occasions that you can think of. So it is important to note before we carry on about temperament. So although we've said that resilience isn't something that we're born with, it can be affected by part of our kind of temperament, our inherent personality characteristics that we are born with. So children can be different from one another, and if you've got multiple children, you might notice, you know, the different ways that your different children respond to things, and how they respond to challenges can be different. So some people and some children will find it a little bit harder than others to kind of bounce back, and they're starting from a slightly different place in terms of that, but that doesn't mean that they can't continue to develop their resilience over time, and that can't improve. That's absolutely possible. It's just important to consider where they're starting from, essentially. And ultimately, you know your children best, and so you know how much they can be pushed, what can be challenged, what support they need, and really following their lead, because they will indicate what they can manage and what they can't. Okay, so this is the first of the sort of 5 ways to well-being. So we're going to go through, surprisingly, 5 of these, and just have a think about what they each are, and then also some ways that we can kind of try to develop these and to give young people these opportunities. So the first one is about relationships and being connected with others. So relationships are really, really important. They're at the center of resilience, really. So you can't build resilience without the people around you. And young people have lots of important people in their lives. It could be their parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, grandparents. It could be teachers, friends, whatever. But these relationships are really important. And if young people have got at least one consistent supportive relationship, then that will really help in terms of managing the ups and downs that we all come across in life. Because within these relationships, that's where we develop these sort of, the core strength allows you to bounce back like that. And also to develop this sort of flexibility in relationships, and which can then be transferred to life more broadly, I guess. So these relationships with the people that we're close to are just so important, and that can't be kind of overstated. So the ongoing presence of supportive relationships will impact that sort of future trajectory, both in terms of resilience but also well-being, and it will really kind of put the brakes onto that stress response that we all go through at times. So it's really important to create opportunities for young people to develop those strong relationships. So that might be with peers at school, it might be in clubs, out of school, it could be with family, but just really making sure that you're sort of valuing those relationships that they're building, because they really will make a big difference. And then we've also got on here about coming alongside. So this is a bit of it's kind of when you go and sit with someone and let them know that you're here and available and listening to them. You're not trying to fix it. You're not trying to change where they are. You're just being with them, meeting them where they are, if that makes sense. So you're showing that empathy, you're showing that positive regard. You know, if they need to sit in the dark and cry, you sit with them in the dark and, you know, let them, not necessarily trying to change things, which is something that we talk about in our anxiety workshop for people who've done that one. Okay, so the second one is about being active. Obviously everyone knows that being active is really good for you. Moving your body is very important, and it's a really good way of relieving stress. Obviously we know that not all young people are massively sporty and into whatever exercise, but it is really valuable to be doing something. So it doesn't matter what you do or how long you're doing it for. It will help to relieve stress, and young people face so much stress. So there's all the stresses at the school, there's stresses about friendships and peers, about what's going on in the world around them. So particularly over the last few years, obviously we've had COVID, we've had the Ukraine invasion, and a lot of that sort of tension around young people really pick up on. ruptures in relationships, all sorts of things. So there's lots of these stresses in life, which will activate the stress response, which is a physiological process. So that's just something that happens biologically when we're exposed to stress, and it activates the fight, flight, freeze response, which you might remember learning about in school or something. So that's just the way that we react when we're faced with a threat. And when we can't easily deal with these stressors, or it's hanging around, we need to find ways of ending that stress cycle, and exercise is a way that can really pull you out of that, and sort of deal with those physiological experiences that you're having in your body, because ultimately your fight flight tends to be about your body gearing up to either run away or fight the dinosaur if we were cavemen. And so all of the responses that you experience in your body are kind of geared up towards, I guess, ultimately exercising in some way, even though that's not what the purpose is, but that is a really good way that we can kind of reduce that and bring down some of that sort of hyper arousal. We go on to the next slide. Okay, so the next one is about being in the present. There's a lot of value on this. It can be really difficult. So I think particularly nowadays, there's so much going on all the time. We're often trying to multitask. We're looking at our phones. We're looking at our emails. You know, there's just so much going on. And I know I'm terrible. I'm awful at looking at my phone whilst I'm on the TV, watching TV and stuff. Just terrible at always multitasking. But it's actually not good for you, because if you're doing lots of things at the same time, then you can't apply yourself to anything entirely, and we can spend a lot of time thinking about things that have happened or what's going to happen in the future, and not really just being present in the moment. And when we are able to just be in the kind of here and now, so just fully engaged with what we're doing, when we're, you know, if we're watching TV, we're just watching TV and not thinking about other things. We're giving our brains a bit of a rest, bit of a breather, time to recharge. And we're also actually increasing our ability to focus, which is really good for our kind of cognitive abilities and our emotions, that ability to just focus on one thing at a time, because I think a lot of us are very overstimulated a lot of the time. So that's kind of about multitasking, being in the here and now. I'm sure lots of you have heard about mindfulness. That's obviously a very kind of popular thing nowadays that you can do. It can sometimes be quite challenging to teach mindfulness, so there are some sort of simple apps and things that you can get that you might find helpful for your young people. Another thing that can be really beneficial in terms of being in the present. So there was a psychologist called Csikszentmihalyi. I apologize if I butchered that name, which I may well have done. He came up with the concept of flow, which he said is like the key to happiness. So flow is a state of sort of complete absorption within the activity that you're doing and that situation. So when you're really involved in something, so that you're almost unaware of everything else around you. So colloquially, it might be like being in the zone, you know, when you've just got that real focus on what you're doing. And we all have it at times. And it's a really powerful experience, actually. And it's about, you're getting this balance between enjoyment and challenge, and you're able to use your strengths. And again, it will help regulate your brain and emotions. It will, if you're really focused on one thing, then your brain isn't going to be looking out for other threats because you've got that focus. So building in flow time can be really valuable to kind of counterbalance all the stresses and things in life. So try at some point to have a think about what activities might create that kind of sense of flow for your young person. So for some young people, it might be art, it might be reading, might be listening to or playing music, it might be playing a game of football, it might be video games, whatever. And it's not about doing them to the exclusion of everything else, but just about allowing time within the day for those kind of activities. Okay, next slide. So just taking a moment to think about what you think might sort of be one of those flow activities for your child. So think about their strengths, think about what they like, think about what they're really good at focusing on, and just try and identify something. Drawing, okay, yeah. I have no artistic talent, but I know that people, okay, drawing's a big one. Dancing, yeah, that's more up my street. Jigsaws, yeah. Art, creating, cycling, being creative again, cooking, making things. We've got a lot of creative people, lots of creative things. Playing football, art, skateboarding, playing PlayStation, yeah. So these kind of activities, I mean, obviously we don't want to be at the point where you're doing it to the exclusion of all else, which I know can sometimes happen and is sometimes a concern that parents have, particularly around video games and things. But allowing enough time for some of these activities that you know will kind of be quite restorative for them is just really valuable. So thank you all for, we've got one person typing, we'll just let them finish what they're typing. Playing cards, okay, yeah, lovely. So just bear those in mind, and we will send all the slides out afterwards, so you will have kind of prompts of these things. Okay, so the next one is about learning. So obviously our children are expected to learn a lot anyway during, you know, throughout their sort of childhood and adolescence, but achievement is something that we need as individuals. We really have a need to achieve things, and your brain can continue to learn however old you are. So I don't know if any of you saw, there was that really old man who took a GCSE maths thing recently. He was like in his 80s, late 80s, I think, and he took his GCSE maths just to be doing that learning, which is just really lovely. So we learn a lot from when things go wrong. And obviously we can try and support our young people when things do go wrong, but it's actually really important that they are given that opportunity to fail and then learn from that and think about how they're approaching tasks and what they can do in the future when things don't go to plan, because, you know, none of us, our lives don't go beautifully to plan. But if young people are experiencing failure and they've got support around them, so they're not on their own with it, then they're developing those skills for life. And when they come up against some kind of barrier or hurdle or difficulty, they're not going to feel like it's a complete disaster, because they'll be able to see that in the past they have managed to get past these things. But if there's repeated failure and not having any opportunities for success, that can be negative. So it's about finding activities that can push them to develop, but that they can also succeed at, because if we're constantly trying and failing, that will be sort of reducing our confidence and making us have a more kind of negative outlook, I guess. And it can be really helpful for young people to know that their brains can change over time, and that actually just because you're struggling when you're 8 with, you know, if you come up against a barrier and you can't do it and you think it's all hopeless, that doesn't mean that it will always be like that, that you can sort of grow your brain and develop it, and that it's not fixed. So this is, we would call it a growth mindset. It's also sort of an example of neuroplasticity, which is literally the definition of your brain changing and developing and growing and things. So we might have certain particular skills and talents and abilities that we might have all along, but we can put in effort and develop towards anything and work towards it. So to try and encourage this growth mindset, it can be really helpful. Instead of, I think some of us, we often automatically say things like, oh, you're so clever, and oh, you're really sporty, you're really good at running. But actually what we want to be focusing on is the process of that and the effort. So if we can start saying, oh, you worked so hard for that, you've done really well, or I noticed how much effort you put into that, or I can see how much your drawings improved since you've been working on it. You're really encouraging them to recognize that actually it's the effort that they put into things that is making them good at those things, rather than them just thinking they have sort of this inherent talent at this and then not at that, therefore they can never change that thing that they're not good at. And so just kind of reminding that it's about growth and development and that we can change. And then also about the power of yet. So you can't do something yet, but that doesn't mean you can't in the future. If I wanted to run a marathon tomorrow, I couldn't do that. But actually, if I were to, well, this maybe isn't the best example, because I think if I were to train for months, I still couldn't run a marathon, but people do. So it is possible, but you can't do it instantly. So we really need to think about the language that we're using and reminding young people that they need time, they need practice, and that it will take a lot of effort to get to these points, but that they can do it. And then the last one is about giving. So this one sounds a little bit odd, sort of when you first look at it, but actually giving has really important benefits. So if you can be kind to other people, if you can do things for people, give people things, for a start, you're building into those relationships that we've already talked about being really important. And you're also really, it's kind of, you feel good. If you've done something nice for someone else and they've appreciated it, it makes you feel good, doesn't it? It gives you that kind of glow inside, you know, which is really nice. And that will really it just makes things more positive. And in terms of building resilience, that's really important, that you're having this kind of, you're encouraging this positive mindset. So it's not that if you start giving things to people, you're going to miraculously feel better, but it can contribute to that kind of positive mindset and the resilience, and also just thinking that if you're being kind to other people, they're more likely to be kind to you, and it just makes the world seem like a nicer place, which will increase that resilience. So we know that, you know, your house is probably not some Disney full of rainbows and sunshine kindness thing all of the time, and there's lots of stresses and lots of challenges, and that's really tricky. But if you're able to kind of demonstrate that kindness, if you can model that for your children so that they can see you being kind to other people, what would be a kind act, children will notice it. They're very observant, they do pick up on things. And then also about being kind to ourselves. So self-compassion is really important, and we're often really bad at doing it and very self-critical. I was about to say I'm terrible for it, and then realized that would be a perfect example of being self-critical. But if you can kind of model that so that we're not being so harsh on ourselves, and we're teaching our children that they don't need to be harsh on themselves, and that actually you can say, I'm really proud of myself for doing that, and things like that, that's really valuable actually. So yeah, just now, so going on to the next Slido question. So just thinking, over the summer, obviously a lot of children and young people have got the, you know, long summer holidays coming up. What could you encourage your child to do more of for their well-being? So thinking about the kind of 5 things we've talked about, which were the connecting with others, the being active, the being in the present, the learning, and the giving. What might you be able to do that would kind of nurture some of those things for your children? Meeting friends at the park, exercise, getting outside, seeing friends, helping out with something, or volunteering. Yeah, that can be really nice, and it's something that they often might not have that much time to do in the school year necessarily. Arranging to see friends. Cooking, yeah, more self-praise, join cooking classes. Cooking's popular. I'm wondering if these cooking comments are from people who've got the 16 pluses who'll be going off to uni soon. Spending time with them, paddle boarding, nature walks, yeah, all really lovely ideas. start a club and get to know new people. Not only, yeah, that's really nice actually, because sometimes school can be quite challenging for young people, and having peer relationships outside of school as well as inside of school can be really valuable, can't it? Swimming, meeting others, going for walks, doing something new. Yeah, that's really nice for the learning. Creative things, special day. Yeah, these are all such lovely examples. Really, really nice. Doing things that challenge them. Yeah, yeah. And actually doing things that challenge them. And if they can't do it at first, you know, encouraging them to keep trying, because they will be able to at some point. Yeah, that's really nice. So like I said before, we will send around all these slides, so you'll have these kind of prompts in your mind, so that over the summer when they're going, oh, I'm bored, you can say, well, okay, shall we move on? Right.
Thanks, Emily. So let's think about managing the next steps and possible transitions or changes that your young person may be experiencing. And transition is actually really linked to what we've already been talking about in terms of resilience, because if we can put the building blocks in for well-being, for resilience, those things that Emily's just talked you through, those 5 steps, then actually young people will be in a much better place and set up to be able to tolerate some challenges, which may include some kind of change or transition. But also, if we can kind of give them the right experiences of transition, or a supportive experience of transition, that in itself and managing that can actually really help to increase resilience, and be quite good for self-esteem as well. So these things really do come alongside each other. So when I talk about transitions, I guess that can be various types of things, whether it's a really small transition or whether it's quite big. So I guess for every parent or carer that's on this call, their young person will be moving up a year, whether it's year 4 to year 5, or they're going from college to university. It may be that some people are actually changing school, so changing kind of from primary to secondary school, or going to university, or there may be some kind of transitions or changes that are just happening elsewhere in life. It could be a house move, it could be a change to the family setup. So whether it's kind of a small transition or one that we deem as bigger, I guess everyone here will have a young person that will likely be going through some kind of transition in the next coming months. And it's really natural that any kind of change really is going to evoke different emotions. So for some people, it may bring excitement, it may bring hope and promise. Some people, it may also bring feelings of anxiety, fear, dread, sadness, perhaps anger if it's not a change that we really want to do. So all of those different emotions may be normal, and often people have a mixture of them as well. And also what comes up with change and transition a lot is that kind of sense of uncertainty, that sense of not knowing. When there's some kind of transition or change, there's always an element of not knowing. And that's actually really, really difficult for most of us to experience. And I'll go on to think about that with you a little bit more in a bit, but we know that uncertainty will come up, and for lots of people, that's quite challenging. So being able to support young people with managing their transitions is going to be a really important life skill, because they're going to come up with lots of transitions in their life. And as Emily's talked about, young people's brains are still very much developing. So if we can kind of support them now as they're developing those skills, then that can be really, really helpful for the future. So we're going to go to another Slido. And for this one, it's actually just kind of thinking about yourself at the moment. I know this presentation is around your young people, but just for yourself, what's been your own experience of transition? Just in a few words, any kind of experiences, emotions, thoughts. And again, everybody here would have experienced a transition, whether it's a huge life transition like being a parent, or those small kind of steps or changes that you may take. We've got some comments coming up, and I expect there'll be a wide variety of responses. So we've got good, anxiety, fear, challenging, stressful, and rewarding. So yeah, we can have different types of experiences at once sometimes. sadness, perhaps, stressful, nervousness, fear of failure. So it can really depend, I guess, on what the transition is, whether it's one that we wanted or whether it's not. Painful, perhaps. Worry, but it usually turns out okay. So often kind of the fears that we have in our head don't actually happen. We're really good at kind of imagining the worst case scenarios. Flexible, nervous and excited at the same time. It's really common. Got a few excited. Mixed, depending on the transition, maybe good, maybe feeling anxious, difficult and anxiety. So you can see so far there's been a huge array of responses, but often people state in kind of a mixture as well, whether that's kind of nervousness and anxiety, but also exciting or all good. So it is going to depend slightly on the context of what that change is, and it is going to bring up different kind of thoughts and feelings. So thank you for just kind of thinking about your own experiences of transition for a moment, because what our young person may be experiencing could be quite different to ourselves, but it's always useful to think about the challenges that they may be going through. So on to one about your child. What kind of transition is your child currently facing? So I guess I mean in the next few months. So as I said, it may be simply they'll be going up to a different school year. It may be that they're experiencing a change right now, a different school. But I think it would just be useful just to capture the audience we've got today and to think about what kind of transition are you holding in mind? The next steps for your young person. Final years of school, moving to secondary school. Year 6, so certain years will have certain associations or motives, so SATs. High school, up to year 13. Exams, yeah. Changing from sixth form to a college, moving to new school, A-levels. So family changes, parents coming back into their life, going to different schools, GCSEs, becoming a teenager. Yeah, it may be just an important part in their kind of life cycle or a big milestone for them. Exams, returning to school if they're currently not attending. Yeah, it's a big change. High school's exams, self-identity. So people kind of thinking about perhaps some psychological changes or transitions that are going on for young people, and also biological, so things like hormones, changing hormones. For some, there may be no current transition, but perhaps there's always one on the horizon or something that someone's worried about. Potentially some options or choices to make, whether it's GCSEs or choosing a sixth form or applying to university. Maybe it's a goal or new thing that they're trying to do in life. So someone said reducing screen time, hopefully. Yeah, so we can see there's lots of different things that we may mean by transition or change. So it's helpful as I kind of speak a little bit more just to hold in mind what your young person's change is going to be. Change your teacher to someone they don't like. So yeah, I guess it can be quite important and powerful to change relationships. Again, all of these things create a little bit of unknown, a little bit of doing something new. Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to move on, but that's really helpful. So let's think about skills around openness and flexibility in our thinking, because these are skills that are really important for resilience, but also managing changes and transitions. And actually these skills in a flexible mindset and openness, it's something that children are very much developing, and teenagers as they go through to their adult years as well. But I guess those younger children will particularly be developing this. So it's not expected that your child is kind of flexible and open at all times. In fact, everyone can struggle at certain times. But as I said, it's a skill that's developing and we can help promote. So thinking about what this actually means. So if we're inflexible, I guess that means we may be reacting in a way that's quite rigid. Perhaps we're not adapting to the present moment and the current circumstances that we're given. Perhaps someone's just stuck in an old way of doing things. and it's almost become a bit of an automatic response. So people may be doing the same thing over and over again, even if it's not getting the results that they want. It's kind of a learned habit. And the difficulty of this is actually people find it hard to kind of grow or learn. And we all know if we keep doing the same thing, that we're going to get the same outcome of it. An inflexible mindset may also be trying to kind of resist or push down some of those inner experiences that we don't always have full control over. So, for example, it may be trying to fight certain emotions which are actually really natural, like anxiety, for example, trying to avoid them, which is a really, really common reaction to anxiety, pushing it away, fighting those feelings. And actually, if we're doing that, we're spending a lot of energy, and it means that we're not actually doing the things that we really want to be doing. So that inflexibility or rigidness is quite normal. We all do it to an extent, but it does have important costs and implications. So you may notice when you've seen this in your young person, maybe you've heard them make comments like, you can't make me do that, or I shouldn't feel like this. Or it may be that you observe it in their behaviour. So I guess what we want to help encourage is that openness and flexibility. So what does this kind of look like, and how can we do that really? So it may start with just building awareness and raising awareness and helping young people notice maybe when they're being stuck in that familiar pattern, doing the same thing over and over again that isn't working. So noticing perhaps when that's playing out, and also being able to look with them whether that's working or not. So it's not automatically telling them that's not working, but encouraging them to think about it. Is this way of responding kind of getting you what you want, whatever that may be? Is it allowing you to do those things that are important to you in life? It may also be helping them to be open and more tolerant of those inner experiences that they're having. So as I said, people may have different kind of thoughts and sensations and feelings that come up, and it could be quite natural to try and push them down or push them away. But actually seeing if we can look at this in a different way, and rather than judging those emotions as good or bad, which we often quite naturally do, just trying to be open and curious to them. So encouraging your child to name what they're feeling or what they're thinking, noticing how strong that feeling is, where they feel it in their body. If it were a shape, what would it look like? If it was a temperature, what temperature would it be? So almost exploring it in a way like they've never kind of explored it before, and rather than kind of automatically resisting, just being curious and open. And as I said, when we're trying to push those things away, actually that takes so much energy from doing the things we want to do. But if we can just notice those experiences and let them come and go, then often actually they will pass a little bit quicker, and we can focus on those things that we want to do. So this is all about kind of increasing a bit more of an open mindset, and just looking at those kind of other possibilities. So often we can feel quite stuck in doing things the same way and feel like there's no other options. But your young person may just need a little bit of support to help think about possibly what are the options. Often there are multiple ways of doing things, even if we don't want to do them. What are the options? Perhaps what are the pros and cons of those options, and actually really trying to use that present knowledge that we have and the current circumstances to make a bit more of an informed choice. So rather than reacting really quickly, having a bit of a pause, slowing down, thinking about kind of where our natural reaction may lead, but also looking at those alternative options and choices. And of course, this is going to look different depending on how old or young your child is. So they may need a bit of kind of support to get them there and to have some of these open conversations. Something that's really important for developing these skills in openness and flexibility is about learning those skills to pay attention to the present moment and not be so hooked up with things in the past or automatically reacting or getting caught up in the future as well. And actually, we've already discussed this concept as Emily talked about when she was talking through the 5 steps of well-being, that paying attention to the present moment can be really helpful. So using those skills, it may be doing a flow activity, or just getting your young person to really notice when their mind has shifted to something in the past or something in the future, and focusing back on what's happening now, what can they see, what are they experiencing. So developing these skills will be really helpful to improve that openness and flexibility. Okay. So I mentioned earlier that with any kind of transition, there will be some feelings of uncertainty. That's quite normal, but also quite unsettling. So we actually all have quite an innate need, really, to have some certainty in life. And it can feel really unsettling when we don't really know what's going to happen in the future. And I guess we can all relate to this very recently with the COVID pandemic. It was huge uncertainty, and for some, there may still be some uncertainty hanging around to do with that. So we can all kind of relate to how difficult uncertainty can be sometimes, and that's just part of being human. We're going to find that quite difficult. But it can be really useful to start opening up a conversation about this and think about times, maybe for a young person, where uncertainty was perhaps embraced. So maybe you can think of an occasion, event or day when actually there was a lot of uncertainty. Your young person didn't know exactly what was going to happen. Yet that was a really kind of positive day for them for whatever reason. Maybe it was really exciting. Maybe there were surprises. Maybe they just dealt with it really, really well. So even if there's not many times where they really kind of loved that uncertainty, are there times that they have been able to manage it despite it being difficult? So there may be kind of some small instances, for example, with the pandemic, where you notice that your child did actually manage those big kind of areas or times of uncertainty. So just trying to, I guess, expand the narrative and conversations around uncertainty, and reflect on some positive experiences as well. And also thinking about the kind of flip side of uncertainty, although there is that kind of innate sense that it's quite unpleasant and we don't like it, thinking about those more kind of positive experiences of it bringing possibility and hope and excitement. And often when you ask people the question, what would life be like if everything was 100% certain? So you knew exactly what was going to come next every day. It was pre-planned, predetermined, and 100% certain. Although people may know some comfort in that idea, actually most people, when they really think about it, can start to discover that a world that was full of constant certainty may actually sometimes be a bit tedious or a bit boring or not something that they want. So that can be a bit of a helpful question to think about. And when there's lots of different uncertainties, and if your child really is struggling with trying to kind of process all of that, it can be quite helpful to kind of think about what is in their control and what is certain and what isn't. So it may be just acknowledging how tough it is about those elements that are uncertain or are out of their control, sitting with that feeling and acknowledging that, but also thinking through those things that they do know or there is some certainty to. So for example, if someone's going to a different school or different setting, it may be that they do know which of their friends are going to be at that school. They may know who their tutor is going to be, or they probably will know what the start time is and what the end time is. So even just those kind of little details and reminding them, these are the things that we do know. If they're taking exams, often, you know, they're not going to know how that's going to go, but they may have an idea of what exams they'll be taking and around about what months they'll be taking them. So just doing this helps create a bit of balance and reduces that kind of overwhelming sense sometimes when there's lots of different uncertainty elements to something that's happening. So I'm just going to talk through some more practical considerations if your young person is going through some kind of change or transition in their life at the moment or will be very soon. And for the majority of people, having some kind of preparation for that change is really, really helpful, and warning of when that change is going to happen. So it may be helpful that they have a little bit of a timeline of what is happening and when it's going to happen. It may be that they need supported to understand that information. For example, if it's quite a big change or there's lots of different things going on, trying to share that information and being transparent as you can in an age appropriate way. So I guess for younger children or children who just struggle to take on lots of information at once, may find it helpful to have some kind of visual aids. So pictures maybe that kind of demonstrate what's going to happen, or a visual timeline or a countdown, things like that. Whereas someone that's able to take on board that information a bit easier or is slightly older, it may just be having a conversation about what that change is and what it's going to look like. And that also gives the opportunity to dispel any myths as well, because it may be that your young person is kind of thinking through lots of things or has certain assumptions which aren't quite true. So it's equally important just to open it up and check that there's no misconceptions about that change, and also kind of any fears or worries as well. It may be, and this is going to depend on what the transition is, but it may be important to have an opportunity to kind of say goodbye to whatever they're changing from, or acknowledge those losses. As I said, we may be experiencing a change or transition that actually we ourselves don't want, your young person doesn't want, or perhaps they do, but in some part they're still sad about the loss. So being able to acknowledge that, and again, that may be a conversation with yourself, getting to kind of name those feelings. It may be something else to say goodbye, and I guess in schools they kind of build in these goodbye rituals. So for example, people in year 6, if they're moving to high school, will often have kind of leaving assemblies and leaving days, and people write notes to each other. All of that kind of stuff really helps with their transition. To say goodbye to someone, write them a card. So whatever it is, if your child is kind of having a loss in some way, I guess thinking about how they can be supported to acknowledge that loss, or say goodbye, or even just express that sadness, which is completely understandable to have. The other thing is thinking about whether they can kind of gradually be exposed to the new change if possible, or just some ways to increase their familiarity to that change before it happens. So one way to increase familiarity may just be kind of keeping it on the agenda, to keep talking about it. So it's not kind of all of a sudden everything changes at once. It may be that they're going to a new place, a new school, that there's some kind of induction days and that they can go to, or you can think about this in summer holiday, whether it'd be helpful to have a walk, do that journey that they'll be doing towards their new school, or whatever the changes, I guess. Is there any way to kind of gradually give them a little bit of an experience of that change before it happens? And I guess to think with your young person whether that would be helpful. But for a lot of people that can help prepare them a little bit, and help if they've got some anxiety around it, hopefully kind of reduce their anxiety a little bit just by having a bit of an experience of the change. So you may want to think about some of these things and how they apply to the changes or transition that your child is experiencing. And then also thinking about the adaptation to change. So often we think about kind of transition, once they're there, they've changed, but we still need to think about once they've made that change, supporting them with the change and adapting to it, because it can take time. So it may be helping them to still establish a sense of normality in other parts of life. So if it's really quite a big change or lots of different routines and they are a bit overwhelmed, seeing if there's still kind of normal activities that they can do, so it kind of keeps their life going in a similar way. So it may be that they still do the same after school activities, for example, or they still keep going to this weekly football club that they've always been going to. Now, if the change involves lots of kind of new information or learning something new, I guess people need a bit of time to adapt to that. And for some people, they may need some prompts or memory aids to help them. So we can probably all think of times where we've changed or gone on to a new job, and it's really overwhelming to begin with all the information. So I guess time to learn new things, and perhaps prompting them, writing lists, or whatever memory aids are helpful for your young person to kind of integrate some of that new information. Also, allowing opportunities for rest. And I think this is really important when someone's going through something that's different, or making an effort to change. It's actually really zapping of our energy, because often we can be quite overwhelmed, perhaps have a high level of emotion, lots of new information. Our brain is working really hard. And you may notice that your young person becomes a bit more tired or a bit more irritable. So just allowing those opportunities for rest, and also sharing with your young person. It's completely understandable for the energy to feel a bit difficult when there's so much change going on. Thinking about with this change, it may be something that they wanted or something that they don't want, but are there any opportunities to actually do something new or exciting that they'll really enjoy? Are there any new possibilities that they can find? So even if they're going to a new school which they're not completely happy about, is there actually something new they can access here that they couldn't in another place? Maybe a really exciting club, or just looking out for those kind of new and exciting opportunities. And also kind of linked to this, any ways to actually help them feel a part of that change a little bit more. So it may be thinking about anything that's going to increase their sense of responsibility with this new change, their ownership over, or their control over elements of it. So it could be different things. Maybe if they've moved to a new house, can they choose the wall colour that they're going to have? If they're going into a new classroom, can they have a new responsibility there? Or is there a choice between what their lunch menu is going to look like in the new term, or maybe they get the responsibility of doing their lunches from now. So something that's actually going to kind of increase their sense of ownership of some of those new tasks. And also really important, if your child is managing to kind of do that change and adapting to it, kind of really making sure you praise them as much as possible for that brave behaviour, because we know that it's not easy. Even if there's positive kind of feelings or expressions from your child, there may also be some things that they're struggling with as well. So actually just acknowledging that brave behaviour or the effort that they're making towards that change. And if they are kind of managing it, that may be a really useful opportunity to sit and think about that with them. So getting them to reflect on how they've managed it, what they've done well, and thinking about their kind of previous preconceptions. They may have felt like, I'm never going to be able to do that. So to actually kind of go back to that and help kind of positively encourage them about how well that they've been doing. So we are towards the end. We've only got a couple minutes left. So we've just got a slide up here, and then I'll kind of summarize and finish off. But I guess as a kind of ending point, again, going back to yourselves, what has helped you as a parent or carer adapt to change or transitions in your life? So I've had a little bit of a think about what could be helpful for young people. But if you just kind of have a think to yourself and type in Slido if you can, what has helped you when you've faced a change, a transition, something you've got to adapt to? What has helped? So we're going to bear this in mind for our young people. And again, what works for us may not work for your young person. So we can kind of hold that in mind, but just think about, I guess, people's different experiences here about what has helped for them. We've got a few people typing, but we've got so far people being able to talk to supportive friends, so having kind of someone else to talk to about it, gaining support, perhaps focusing on the more positive elements of the change. We've got talking again, resilience. So again, these concepts are really linked, aren't they? Finding that resilience, finding someone with similar experiences, people in a similar boat. Yeah, it's really, really helpful. Perhaps doing a bit of preparation, background reading, having your own support, knowing what is coming. So maybe that's kind of being able to think about what you do know, or what isn't uncertain. Realistic expectations. Yeah, that's an important one. Looking at past experiences where I've coped, and yeah, I guess that fits with something that I was just saying there around getting your young person to notice when they did manage it, or if they have been managing a change, and that can really help with our self-belief and self-confidence. So we've got a few themes of talking to others, talking to friends. Thank you. I see there's a couple of people speaking as well, but so I guess holding in mind, although your young person may have different experiences to you, just holding in mind what your experiences are to transition and what's helped and what some people find is helpful. And it may be having a bit of a conversation with your child with what they've found has helped before when they've faced a transition or change, because ultimately they would have. So think about what's helped, but equally it can also be helpful to think about what wasn't helpful. When I faced this change, this is what really was not helpful, so that maybe something different can be done this time. Okay, thank you for all of that. That's great. Okay, so we've come to the end. On the slide is just a bit of summary of some of the things that we've talked about today. As Emily said, all of these slides will be sent to you, so don't worry, you don't have to kind of hold all of that information in your mind. Also, these resources will also kind of be included in the slides and sent to you, so there's just some resources here on things like Leah Waters writes a lot about kind of well-being and transition, and there's some really great stuff she's done about strength switch. We've got resource on supporting children through secondary transition, and there's also a book which people may be interested in, or topics around acceptance and commitment therapy, otherwise known as ACT, where some of these concepts we've talked about around uncertainty are mentioned. As I said, these resources will be included, as well as these kind of apps and websites that are available. So I know Emily mentioned mindfulness, and there are so many different websites and apps where you can access things like mindfulness, for example. Headspace, put there on as well. Okay, so thank you for everyone for joining. That is the end. We've just got a Slido for your feedback. Just to say, I've just noticed someone raised their hand. Unfortunately, it's really frustrating because I know it allows you to raise your hand, but it doesn't allow us to see you or hear you. So I'm really sorry, I can't kind of respond or interact to whatever you said. But I hope that today has provided people with a little bit of information to go away and think about. There are some workshops that kind of link up with some of the things that we've talked about today, if you want a little bit more on them. So for example, on YouTube we have all of our recorded workshops we've done before. So we've done ones on anxiety, which may overlap with this a little bit. We haven't talked about anxiety much today, but that may be one that's helpful to go to. There's also one specifically more around uncertainty as well. So I would have a look at what else is available if you haven't seen them before. Thank you so much for coming along. There's just one last thing. So this is actually the first time we've kind of done the workshop just like we've done it today. So it's always helpful to kind of bear in mind what people are finding the most helpful bits to kind of take away. And it's also, I guess, a good space for you to reflect on, is there anything that you kind of do differently or keep doing the same of, or any kind of thoughts that you have from watching this about things that you can consider with your young person. So we always do these questions at the end, just to get a bit of feedback really, so it's really helpful, whatever it is that you can comment on. So I'll just leave this up for a minute longer and then we'll end. So you should have an email coming through soon from our admin email, which has the resources and information, and also some of those kind of other things that you can access if you're wanting a little bit more as well.
Thank you so much for coming, and I hope you all have a good summer.
Yes, so actually we do monthly workshops, but we normally have a bit of a break over summer because people are very, very busy. So yeah, thank you for joining us this evening. I can see lots of people are writing comments, which is really, really helpful. Yeah, we hope that you were able to take a few things away. Hopefully when I go off this, you should still be able to write, and we get sent all of the feedback. So that's fine if you're still writing on Slido to keep doing that. But that's the end. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.